What's up, everybody? My name is Joe Brown, and this is Heresy Financial. Today, I have a good one for you. We are looking at this paper called The People's Ledger, How to Democratize Money and Finance the Economy. Basically, what this is, we're going to dive into all the details here. Basically, what it is what I've been saying their reasoning for implementing a CBDC will be in the future, overhauling the way that the structure of the Federal Reserve works with the banking system in order to make it just essentially what I've been saying a CBDC would be. So this proposal was written by Saleh Omarova, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce her name. She wrote it last year, so this is nothing new. It's also just a proposal. This isn't a bill. This isn't law, so nothing to get like freaked out about. There's no doom and gloom here. This is just a proposal by somebody who wrote a paper, and then a couple days ago, the Vanderbilt Law Review published this paper. Now, where it does become a little bit more concerning is who she is. She is the nominee, Biden's nominee, to head the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. So she's not a nobody, and this is her proposal on how to completely revamp the structure of the whole banking system along with the Federal Reserve in order to turn it into the People's Ledger, which is basically going to be what I've been saying a CBDC will be all along. Ready? Let's dive in. All right, guys, so I have this linked in the description below just in case you want to go take a look at it yourself, read it. The first thing I want to point you to is in the abstract of the article. Here we see the proposal is the complete migration of demand deposit accounts to the Fed's balance sheet. So what is going on here? Right now, when you have a bank account, obviously you've got a bank account with Chase or Bank of America or Wells Fargo if you hate yourself. And so you're going to have a bank account with one company that's a bank. You're going to have your deposits there. Payments are going to go in and out of it. The suggestion or the proposal is what a central bank digital currency would be. And that is where instead of having your account at a bank, you have an account directly with the Federal Reserve. Some places call it a wallet, but all it is it's skipping the middleman of using a bank for demand deposits. So right now, the Treasury, the federal government, they have an account held directly with the Federal Reserve. Right now, banks have accounts held directly with the Federal Reserve. When the Federal Reserve prints money, they're printing reserves. They're creating reserves and crediting that to the accounts that banks hold at the Federal Reserve. What this is saying is abandon the bank as the middleman. Everybody has their account directly with the Federal Reserve, and that way you go directly to the source. So that's the first thing here that is completely in line with what I've been saying is the point, or one of the things that would be involved with a central bank digital currency is the nationalization, the complete nationalization of the banking system. And I even made a video a couple days ago about how after the next crash, that's one of the things that they're going to have to do is nationalize the banking system, partly because it will be associated with rescuing the financial system from a crisis, but partly because they're going to have to do yield curve control, bring all interest rates down. Banks won't have a way to make money on interest rates, even long-term ones anymore. And so they're going to have to nationalize the banking system to use them as basically the plumbing still, but we'll just absorb for especially the demand deposit accounts go straight to the Federal Reserve, and there are some good reasons for that. In terms of the proposal here. So, in terms of the proposal, why they would do that? Why would you go from the banks directly to the Fed? And here's where we get to the second point. In basic terms, here, let me make this bigger so you can see it. In basic terms, the Fed will credit all eligible Fed accounts, that's your account held directly at the Federal Reserve, when it determines that it's necessary to expand the money supply in order to stimulate economic activity, ensure better utilization of the national economic productive capacity. So this is straight up MMT. When it's talking about better utilization of the national economic productive capacity. MMT theorists, they talk about idle resources and how if as a top-down centralized decision maker trying to control and fine-tune an economy, you want to make sure that resources aren't idle, being put to work, what you would do is you would expand the money supply, but it requires a very tight marriage between fiscal and monetary policy, because right now, monetary policy is what the Fed does. The only thing they do, raise lower interest rates, credit money to banks, credit money to the government through purchasing treasuries from the open market. So that's more of those are blunt force tools. They don't have the precision that fiscal policy does. Fiscal policy is what the federal government spends money on, what they tax money out of. So fiscal policy can be a lot more of a scalpel, because if they want the prices of healthcare to go up, all you have to do is subsidize healthcare, introduce new taxes and regulations to make it more complicated. Suddenly the industry throws up prices for healthcare. If you want to make something, stop happening, you tax it. If you want to make it happen more, you subsidize it, and so you can have more of a precision, more of a scalpel-like approach to fine-tuning an economy if you have direct control over fiscal policy. But the only way to have that much control with fiscal policy is to have it be married tightly with monetary policy. And what I mean by that is you need the capacity to spend at will. And the reason for that is because it takes a lot of money to do this. So with the Federal Reserve having the capacity to credit eligible Fed accounts when it determines that it's necessary to expand the money supply, that's essentially, hey, we think that it would be better if people with a certain amount of wealth or below a certain amount of income have more money. And so they would credit your account. So it's just like the next step from stimulus checks. It's just the next logical step. It just makes it a lot more efficient for the Federal Reserve to be able to monetize all of this spending by expanding the money supply directly to the people they think need it. They would be able to control how those dollars were spent. And so you could credit money that was only able to be spent on food, for instance, and you wouldn't be able to spend those dollars on financial assets, let's say. And that would be to prevent printing a bunch of money as the Fed and watching it all go into, Dogecoin, something like that. That would never happen, right? And so in order to prevent themselves expanding the money supply and causing bubbles in certain speculative assets, they could credit accounts as needed, as they determined, as they saw fit, with money that could be spent in certain ways. Now, here is where the crazy part comes in, because this is what I've said all along, but I haven't seen it directly stated in a proposal like this. Implementing a contractionary monetary policy by debiting Fed accounts. This is the opposite of trying to expand the money supply and cause inflation in certain areas. This would be a tool that they would use in, get this, only extreme and rare circumstances when the Fed is unable to control inflation by raising interest rates and deploying its new asset side tools discussed later on in the paper. So this is saying, hey, there are certain circumstances in which there's just too much money floating around the system, causing runaway inflation that we can't get under control. They would retain the ability to just subtract dollars from people's accounts. And remember, it might not be arbitrary. They might be doing it according to a certain set of rules, but they've determined what those rules are. So they would have complete control to be able to give somebody money or take money away and stop those transactions from being able to be made for certain things. Maybe they put a pause on money for a certain amount of time. Maybe they say, okay, only a certain percentage of your money can be spent on certain transactions that are, in areas that are getting frothy. And so this is an extremely powerful and dangerous tool to allow such a small committee, so removed and isolated from the day-to-day world, from where the decisions should be being made, to just impose policies that they think will help the economy. When you get to this kind of scale, when you're dealing with 300 million people, when you're dealing with the GDP the size of an economy like the States, you're not able to do this effectively. You're going to have massive problems show up. All right, and if that wasn't crazy enough, this is even crazier here in what this proposal suggests the Federal Reserve should be able to do. If a particular asset class, such as mortgage-backed securities, technology stocks, any particular asset class, rises in market value at rates suggestive of a bubble. So, at their determination, if they look at something and they decide that they think it looks like a bubble, they would have the capacity to short these securities. So if you think, and by the way, shorting it is selling something that you don't own. If you think that what the banks do in shorting stocks, what the hedge funds do in shorting stocks, what the bullion banks do in shorting gold and silver, if you think the manipulation there is criminal, if you think that it's fraudulent, just wait until the one entity with a legal monopoly on money printing and money creation and the mandate by law, by Congress, to help the economy, to support the economy, to stabilize the economy. When they get their hands on the power to short something, it is game over. Can you imagine what this would do to the price of anything? Because in a free market, the ability to short sell something is absolutely necessary. Because you take a company like Zillow, for instance, in the news a lot lately for dumping all the houses that they bought way above the prices that they should have, and now they're selling them at a loss. I can't remember his name. Steve Eisman, back in 2019, he was all over CNBC because it was his new big short. He was shorting Zillow because they were talking about the total addressable market was huge and they're going to get into home flipping. And he was saying you can't do it. They don't understand the local markets, the differences. They're going to make massive mistakes. And it took a while, but he was right. And I don't know whether he held on to his shorts. But the point that I'm making with this is basically that the ability to short sell provides the incentive for the free market agents to discover fraud and incompetence because it allows them to profit off of it. And here's the kick. Here's why short selling in a free market is so good, because it provides skin in the game. That if the person puts their money on the line because they think there's fraud and they're wrong, they lose big. So there's massive skin in the game to have the incentive that you're right, that company that you're shorting is bad, that it's going down, that you're right and they're wrong. And if you are right, you can profit off that massively. So the incentive structure is one of the most beautiful incentive structures in free markets. The problem is when you get somebody who has the ability to short without the negative potential, without the ability to fail, because they can print money. Because if you or I go and short something and it goes up, we get a margin call. We have to buy the shares to close. We get sold out or we get bought out, and we lost because we couldn't write it up to infinity, right? Well, if somebody though has the ability to print money, they can sell an infinite amount. They can borrow an infinite amount, even if the price continues to rise into their selling pressure until the point at which they absorb all of the buying. And they can push that price down because they have an infinite ability to sell. Nobody in the free market has an infinite ability to sell. It doesn't exist unless you have a legal monopoly on the creation of money. So this would give the Federal Reserve de facto control over all asset prices, whether the market is crashing and they're buying, whether the market's going up and they're selling, whether they see something that looks like a threat to their financial system and they decide to short it, to put downward pressure on it, to stop the speculation in a bubble. Very dangerous power to give to an entity like the Federal Reserve. So in summary, none of this is a bill. This was written a year ago, right around the time when central bank digital currencies were making a lot of noise on the news. And so this is somebody who's not a nobody. She is Biden's nominee for the head of the Comptroller of the currency. And so she's not a nobody, but this isn't law. And this isn't a bill that's being pushed through Congress. What this is a very accurate description, even though this is encouraging it. To me, this is things that I would say this is why we should discourage a central bank digital currency. And the final cherry on top is that it's titled the People's Ledger. That's something I would expect the CBDC in China to be called. The People's Republic of China has, a People's Ledger. And so that's just the final cherry on top, that it's titled the People's Ledger, because clearly There is nothing about this that puts power into the hands of the people. This takes power away. This removes competition in banking. This consolidates an unprecedented level of power in the hands of the Federal Reserve to create and destroy money on a broad scale and on a very small scale. If you or I are engaging in certain transactions that somebody at some point decides not to like, now you're suddenly locked out of transacting, period, permanently, or maybe just for those transactions, or maybe they arbitrarily decide a certain wealth level is too much. They institute a wealth cap and they can enforce it because now they know you have this much money. Well, any new dollar that comes into that account on top of your whatever that limit is just goes away, just disappears. Very, very powerful tools, very, very dangerous tools to hand to the Federal Reserve. So I'm very thankful that this is not a proposed bill, that this is not being talked about or debated in Congress, but it just goes to show where the heads are and where the thinking is of some people who desire to have control. As always, really appreciate you guys. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.